Okay, thank you everyone who can join us and welcome to the Goodwill GovGrant Tax Incentive for Innovation webinar. Firstly, I would just like to go over the house rules. This webinar is recorded. All participation microphones and cameras will remain muted and switched off throughout. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A feature and we'll try and answer them all at the end of the session. And finally, if you see any technical issues, please raise them in the Q&A feature. Goodwill are a UK business who specialise in supporting medium to small sized companies to grow and scale in the UK. We supply a full suite of support services, which includes governance, finance, HR, payroll and virtual office. GovGrant are a R&D tax relief specialist and they have been for over 10 years. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Sharon, Account Partnership Manager, and Bridget, Account Relationship Manager, to speak more about GovGrant as well as R&D tax credits and intellectual property services.
Hello, thank you, Georgia. Just as a form of introduction, my name's Sharon Vaness. I'm the Accountant Manager at GovGrant, as George said, and I'm here today with my colleague Bridget, who is the Accountant Relationship Manager. Before I start, I'd just like to say thank you to George, Hannah and the team at Goodwill for organising this event. Both Bridget and I are delighted to have the opportunity to host the webinar today and to share some of the details about R&D tax relief scheme and also the very underutilised patent box scheme. During today's session, we hope we can shed some light on the schemes that are available and just share how your business can make most of the opportunities and the tax benefits which are available to UK companies. We hope you find this both useful and informative. As George said, if any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. We've allocated some time at the end for some questions. We're happy to answer them. If we do run out of time and we haven't been able to cover all the questions answered, we're very happy to pick them up offline. I'll start with a brief introduction to GovGrant and then I'll move on to the schemes that are available for UK businesses. I've got some interesting stats I'd like to share. And then Bridget is going to go into a bit more detail about who can qualify and what businesses should look for. And then she's also going to cover some of our common misconceptions. I'd like to also share some interesting success stories of clients we currently work with and just show the sort of diverse sort of industries that we currently help and support. As mentioned, we'll finish off the Q&A session and the webinar today should last about 20 minutes. So just to kick off, the R&D tax scheme was introduced in 2000. Since 2006, GovGrant have been helping UK businesses make use of the scheme. So far, we have over 9,000 successful claims under our belt, which to date has resulted in an in excess of £250 million tax benefit to our clients. So you may ask, how do we achieve this? Well, we have highly skilled professionals with extensive experience on how IP and R&D work hand in hand, and also extensive knowledge of the patent box scheme. Before I move on to the next slide, I think it's the final bullet point on here is probably worth highlighting. Compliance, integrity and long-term value creation are pillars of our service. I think it's worth mentioning because our average client claim relationship is in excess of 11 years. I'm going to go on to the schemes that are available, and I'd like just to spend a few minutes on the schemes that are available for UK businesses, and I've also got some interesting stats to share with you. I'll start with the R&D, and then I will move on to patent box, which you'll see are just two very, very different set of stats. So just looking at this slide, as you can see from here, in the world of R&D, the numbers are growing, the volume's growing, not just in numbers of clients that are making claims, but also in actual benefit that's being paid out. So year ending 2020, the number of claims have actually increased, you can see here, have increased by 16%. So, which means the total number of benefits in the UK claims have been made in the UK at 86,000, just under 86,000. But what I think is quite interesting is in the SME market, which is very much where Goodwill operate. There's 81,000, just over 81,000 of businesses and SMEs that are actually claiming R&D, which is an increase from prior year, again at 16%. And then the overall claim benefit is increased by 19%. So last year, or year ending 2020, £7.4 billion was paid out by HMRC. So also we want to look at what sort of businesses are making these claims and what are benefiting from this tax benefit. Well, if we look at vertical sectors, you can see here 64% of claims are in the manufacturing, professional services, scientific and technical, information and communications. And then with the majority of these businesses situated in London, the South East, and also East of England. East of England is quite interesting because it incorporates towns like Cambridge, Bidborough, which is Innovation City. I'm now going to move on to Patent Box. And as I mentioned, this is a very, very different story. The first thing you'll see here is there's a decrease. Patent Box is a desperately underutilised tax, and Bridget's going to go into a bit more detail as to why this is. But when we look at these slides here, there's a number of stories it's telling us. The first thing we can see from the slide is only 1,400 businesses, just under 1,400 businesses claimed, compared to 86,000 in R&D, which is a decrease, as I mentioned, of 2.5%. Encouragingly, in the SME space, there's a small increase, albeit only 0.5%, but it is an increase. And the overall benefit paid out by HMRC has grown by 4%, so it's £1.174 billion paid out. What we can also see from these slides, out of the 1,370 businesses that have benefited under the Patent Box scheme, 74% of those were SMEs, but the SMEs only received 8% of the benefit. So a lion's share of the Patent Box benefit paid out by HMRC is going to larger organisations. So in brief, 355 of the large organisations received 92% of the £1.17 billion claimed in 2020. Again, looking at the vertical sectors, very similar to R&D. Manufacturing is a bit more wholesale in here, but scientific, professional. But then if we look at the geographical split, an interesting story here. Mainly London, as you 50% of all Patent Box claims are actually 50% are from London. That's because, as we've established here, a lion's share of the revenue paid out is to the large corporations, and large corporations are headquartered in central London. A smaller number in the southeast of England, and then we've also got 2% of all patents, UK patents, coming out of the northeast. So what happens in the northeast to get that? Interestingly enough, this is where Dyson have their innovation centre. So it makes it a bit more obvious there. I'm going to pass on to Bridget, who's going to talk about the innovation cycle, the criteria for qualifying, and we'll cover off some popular misconceptions.
Thank you, Sharon. Here we would like to talk about innovation cycle. What actually is the definition of R&D, and what should a business look for? In brief, to be eligible for R&D, you need to provide some sort of benefit to the industry, the customer, or your company. It is important to remember that R&D for tax purposes takes place when a project seeks to make an advance in science or technology. This is possible in a range of different things, such as improving existing processes, developing a new product, streamlining and improving systems. But it also must be technically challenging. Plus, was no knowledge available as to how to achieve what you were attempting to develop or improve, like looking on a Google search. This advance needs to be challenging to a competent professional. Also, there was no guarantee it was going to be successful. The top three sectors, as Sharon has mentioned, are engineering, manufacturing and IT software. But R&D can be found in lots of hidden gems, and we are here to help you find them. So who qualifies? You must be a UK limited company, have a completed set of accounts for year 1. The time and money spent can be found in the financial statements for the tax year you are claiming. If you face challenges and projects took a long time, these are good indications of eligibility. What is really interesting is none of this is groundbreaking. So an advance in science or technology, for example, create a process or product or a device, or a scientific or technical uncertainty, like turning something scientifically feasible into a cost-effective material or process. Ask yourself. There are some simple questions you can ask yourself about your business, which will help you to understand if your business may qualify. For example, do you perform any testing, or do you design and make new products? Is it an appreciable or considerable improvement? And is it an advance in knowledge and capability? R&D in your intellectual property. It is a very hot topic for us at GovGrant. Something we offer clients is an IP harvest. I have a short video clip, but what this actually means is we look for the R&D for something which we believe is eligible for a patent with a view of getting into the patent box regime, thus reducing corporation tax to 10% from 19% and soon to be 23%. Have a look at the following clip.
By harvesting your IP, you're tapping into a gold mine that's right underneath your nose. But before you tune out, IP actually does relate to you and isn't as complicated as you think. With a simple patent found in your R&D, you're taxed much less and will save thousands a year, every year, year after year. But businesses won't do that because when people hear IP or patent box, they think this. They think jargon. They think academia. They think Bill the lawyer. And Bill the lawyer spends a lot of your time and your money going through every little detail and doesn't really have an incentive to get results quickly, or sometimes at all. That's why with GovGrant's IP Harvest, we've flipped the conversation. So when you think IP, you don't have to think this. You can just think this. Let me paint you a picture. No jargon, no academia. No massive bills from Bill, because we don't try to harvest the whole field. That's to say we're not obsessed with creating an expensive, impenetrable shield around you. Just a single blade of grass. The secret ingredient, that small, shiny gem. Because, make no mistake, that single gem helps our clients save thousands every year and could easily help you too. We are success aligned, so we work quickly and cost effectively. That's why we can give you a quick yes/no answer that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. So get in touch and we can ask you a simple yes or no question that will let you know exactly what you can harvest from your R&D.
This is your route to patents. I hope you found that useful. The Patent Box scheme was introduced several years after the R&D scheme. It is a government strategy to reward businesses and incentivise them to keep their IP in the UK. As I mentioned previously, when in Patent Box, a business will benefit from a corporation tax deduction to 10% on the worldwide profits which come from the qualifying IP income. Patent Box is available for every year a business holds a patent. A UK patent typically lasts for 20 years from the application filing date, which means that the total amount claimed from the tax relief can add up over the years and be extremely valuable to the company. So am I eligible? Again, you need to be a UK limited company, paying UK corporation tax, and filed a patent application and generated profits related to the patented intervention. It doesn't have to be amazing, a lot of small improvements to existing products or processes. So I'm just going to share a few misconceptions. My company is too small to bother. Well, 81,000 claims up to year end 2020 were SMEs. We don't have an R&D department, a laboratory, or anybody in a white coat. A lot of our R&D is tweaked and improving existing products and processes, and not lab related at all. Our R&D spend is really low and it's just not worth it. This might be the case, but let our technical team have a look. It costs nothing. Their expertise is identifying R&D, and it will be a total transparent yes or no. I'm making a loss, so I'm not paying corporation tax anyway. For R&D, you do not need to be a profit-making organisation. The relief can be taken as a cash payment. It can't be relevant to me, or my accountant would have mentioned it. Most accountants work with specialists who help identify R&D for their clients. We are fortunate working with Goodwill and their clients. Not all accountants are so proactive in this area. The less I have to do with HMRC, the better. Well, yeah, we all think that, but personally, I think it's very important. R&D is a legitimate tax incentive. The stats prove that for every £1 HMRC give back in R&D tax benefit, a business will reinvest £2.50 back into the economy, for example, by employing a new member of staff or moving to a new premises. The government wants to reward innovation. Looking at patent box, belief that the patents are about protection and not value creation. I would say that this is the most common misconception. When most businesses think of patents, they think of protection, not commercialisation. Considered high costs upfront with no uncertainty of success. The upfront cost is a lot less than many businesses think, and the initial cost, but the reduction to 10% corporation tax for 20 years certainly covers the initial investment. Perceived complexity of the legal process to create a patent. We can demonstrate that getting a patent granted can be relatively easy and pain-free. Lack of awareness of the patent box scheme. There is definitely a lack of awareness. This isn't because there is a lack of products eligible for a patent. Businesses aren't aware of it. As we saw in an earlier slide, there were only 1,100 patent box claims in year ending 2020, compared with the 86,000 R&D claims, with only 8% benefit being attributed to the SMEs. Misunderstanding the mechanics of the scheme. You don't need to patent the whole system, just a component, but the patent box benefit applies to the whole system. Over to you, Sharon.
Yeah, thank you, Bridget. I've got a handful of success stories here, which I thought would be really interesting to share because they're also very different and diverse. I won't read them all out, but I'll go through a few of them, which I hope you find quite interesting. The first one here, this was a client we started working with a few years ago, a company based in central England, growing tomatoes. They developed a hydroponic system for growing their tomatoes so they would ripen at the optimum time. Our R&D technical specialist was on site, did a very successful R&D claim for them, but also identified that in the system they'd built for growing their tomatoes, there was a component that he felt was fundamental to the output, and thought it was something that they should apply for a patent. I'm pleased to say that's now been patent granted. We're now working with this particular client on a patent box claim. Consequently, for the next 20 years, the worldwide sales of all of their tomatoes will now be paying 10% corporation tax. Next one here, again, this is quite an interesting one as well. Logistic firms, they identified that there were vans driving up and down all throughout the whole of the UK, delivering parcels and coming back with empty vans. Not very good for the environment and also not very good commercially. They developed a platform technology where someone could identify a van in their local area, get an instant price, book the van that would then be utilised on their return journey. So not only was it more profitable for the business, but also a reduction to CO emissions. This is an interesting one as well. It was a bespoke control system. We started working with them about 4 or 5 years ago. Initially, they had a very large failed R&D project. As the times progressed, we've now increased their R&D tax benefit by over 500%. Knotweed, I don't know whether anybody's been involved in knotweed, but highly invasive, very difficult to get rid of. You have to get the specialist in. We work with a company, a leading specialist in Japanese knotweed and other invasive plants. The end result, through the extensive R&D, they developed a zero waste solution, and their screening process allowed you to separate the knotweed, so that thousands of tons of really good soil wasn't going into landfill. A few other on here that are probably worth mentioning. Again, this is a client we worked with for many years on their testing and measuring systems for the performance and safety of a boat, or their boat building business. This again, I think is particularly interesting. This is a company that's involved in what is called smart garments. It started about 9 years ago, and they designed a product to enhance the lives of wearers. It used compressed fabric to harness and recycle the athlete's energy to improve recovery. It's a smart garment. Their garments are currently used by Olympic medalists, British forces, world-setting explorers, and also fitness and sports enthusiasts alike. And it's just sort of to add, it's made of conductive yarns, all of which was their R&D. So there was quite an extensive claim there. Again, another software. This was helping, similar to the logistics business, a software technology supporting young people with career choices. And then the last one we've got on here is a glazing company. They identified that there was a way of building windows with glazing bars which sit inside the system, and rather so they could be built in the fabric of the window rather than externally fitted. As a result of that, it's a much quicker and much swifter solution, and their windows are now used across the globe, and predominantly in Asia and US. I just thought I've picked a handful of different businesses across a whole range of different vertical sectors, which I think is just really useful to see. As Bridget mentioned, a lot of companies, when they think of R&D, tend to think of something that's been born out of a lab or something that's very scientific. This isn't the case. I don't know if we've got any questions.
Thank you, Sharon and Bridget. That was a really great presentation, full of useful information. I believe you have answered some of the questions we received already. I'll still go through them in case you want to add any more information. So one of the first questions received was, as somebody new to the UK market, starting a branch in the UK, what important things should we be aware of regarding R&D?
Do you want to answer that? Shall I answer that, Bridget?
I'll get that one. Thanks, Sharon. So you just need to ensure that the branch is registered for UK corporation tax. If anyone is in this situation, we're happy to provide some advice on specific cases. So just give us a call.
Okay. The second question was, what is the qualifying criteria for R&D?
Yeah, we've covered this off, but just to recap, the business must be a UK limited company or an LLP, which is made up of limited companies, and they must be liable to pay corporation tax. They've got to complete their full year of trading, have a set of accounts, and the qualifying R&D, the activities which we didn't mention, have to be stipulated in the BEIS guidelines. But we will, if there's a situation, we're very happy to talk to the client and just understand what they're doing. For us, as always with HMRC, the devil is in the detail. So it just depends on how might they go about the activities, whether they qualify or not. But developing products, processes, as Bridget mentioned, improving existing processes, new products, and sometimes they're just really small tweaks. Going back to the tomato grower, there was just one component that they changed in their irrigation system that actually made them eligible for patent box, but that's where the IP harvest comes in. So it doesn't cover routine R&D or product development, but it's something which is challenging, and always a failed project is always a really good example of R&D, because they've tried and it hasn't worked and they're trying and trying again.
Perfect. Okay, the next question is, what are the deadlines for filing the tax credits?
So I'll get that, Sharon. 2 years from the year end. So an R&D claim is made in the company's tax return. So the same statutory deadlines to filing an amended tax return apply, i.e. 2 years from the accounting period end date. Perfect.
Okay, the next question is, how many years can we backdate a claim for?
Actually, the answer is the same. They go back 2 years. So exactly as Bridget said, the amendments to the statutory deadline, so exactly the same. So 2 years from their year end.
Okay. Is the R&D incentive available for a cost plus entity?
I'll get that one. It depends on specific cases, the specifics of the case, to be honest, and we'd be happy to assess if anyone is affected by this.
The next question was, our main asset is non-patentable software. Any chance we can benefit from tax incentives as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. The incentive and software and product offering the company don't need to be patented or patentable in order to qualify. They're two very different taxes. So under the R&D team, it just needs to have qualifying R&D activities. So things that are technically challenging, failed projects. So absolutely.
Can internationally based companies claim these UK benefits?
Me again. If they have a UK entity that is registered for corporation tax and files accounts and Companies House, then they may qualify, but it does depend on how the costs are distributed between the entities, as if to a claim would be viable or not. So if there is no UK entity, then there is no possibility to make a claim.
Okay, what are the qualifying expenditures and the clear difference between employee costs and subcontractors?
Shall I pick up this, Bridget? So qualified expenditures, things that can be included like employee costs. So this is actually employees who work for you. So employee costs, including gross salary, NI, employee's pension can be included as well, any bonuses, any overtime, all of which have been assessed and spent time by that employee as qualifying, go towards their qualifying R&D. Third-party costs, there's a restriction on there. So if they're using subcontractors, there's R&D that's restricted to 65% of the qualifying costs, and that's the same for agency workers. But also other things that can be included, consumables, so items that are physically consumed and destroyed as part of the R&D, but they couldn't have been sold for a commercial gain. That's important to mention. Software. So elements of your software, client's cost software can be included, and you can also include utilities. So heat, light, power, that can also be proportioned to qualifying expenditure.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. We have received a few more questions through the Q&A feature, which we've been able to address. So we will send these over to GovGrant to answer, and we'll email the responses in due course.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.